BitShares Beyond Bitcoin Hangout. This is the Beyond Bitcoin. Let me get started again. Please make sure to edit that and post it for somebody else to listen to. Welcome everyone to a Beyond Bitcoin BitShares Open Source Agenda Hangout. Today is Friday, August 4th, 2017, and this is Hangout 32. We join every week to cover various important issues in the BitShares ecosystem and sometimes go outside of that realm a little bit, but we like to focus a lot on the central aspects that are important about what BitShares is going through at any given time. And we also are starting to really take a focus on something called worker proposals in the BitShares ecosystem. For those who are unfamiliar with BitShares worker proposals, it is a system where the blockchain itself and its stakeholders can decide, the stakeholders can decide and utilize the blockchain to vote on your worker proposal to pay for work that you do for the chain. We are very proud of this feature, as it is the first blockchain that has enabled this kind of self-funding mechanism for people who are doers and want to get a little bit of payment and a little bit of voting in the ecosystem for the work that they give to our community. So with that said, we have an agenda that is open source that we all are welcome to post to every week on steemit.com. So you can go to steemit.com/@officialfuzzy and always look for the latest RSVP posts for both the BitShares Hangouts, open source agendas, and for Beyond Bitcoin Hangouts. So please join there, RSVP every week, especially if you have an idea for a BitShares worker proposal. Now, with that said, first on the agenda for today, and we're going to start doing this every week as long as I can get G Chicken, which I believe he will be. He is a very persistent gentleman. He is posting these now to our RSVP threads, the BitShares State of the Network report. I have asked him to kind of give us a watered down version and post it to our RSVP threads so people who join up can get a little idea of what's going on in the BitShares State of the Network report, of some of the most important, poignant points, and then they can go ahead and dig into it a little bit deeper if they would like to go to the thread itself and follow his links. So thank you, G Chicken, aka @SteamPower on steemit.com, for doing this every week, and I will make sure to do my best to get this information out. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and go through that, and then we will go through the worker proposals for today. Extract from the BitShares State of the Network report. A long-running exchange, BTCE, has been shut down by the U.S. authorities, and servers including wallet files holding customer funds have been seized. BTCE has tweeted out that they intend to make customers whole in the coming weeks, but the situation is still unfolding, and their ability to refund the customers is still in question. The next bullet point is Stan Larimer has done a podcast with Richard Jacob from the Future Tech Podcast. The podcast covers BitShares, Steemit, EOS, Cryptonomics, the Billion Hero Campaign, Bitcoin United, and much more. This week, BitShares core developer Alfredo at Ox Arbitrage on Steemit has released a roadmap relating to his active employment for the BitShares blockchain via shareholder-approved worker proposals. He has proposed to spend the next 4 weeks working 50-50 on a new block explorer and core development task that he has on his to-do list. So thank you very much, Alfredo. BitGold, on another topic, has been affected by a global settlement event, which has prevented the smart coin from being borrowed into existence. Current supply is still trading at normal, but no new BitGold smart coins can be created at this time. Never fear, however, Cyrano is working on a BSIP-0018 at the moment that will allow assets in the situation to be revived. On another point would be Michael X this week in Telegram has mentioned the creation of a new BitShares wallet and UI, possibly multiple wallets. There is no official announcement yet, but work has already started. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get into, let's go ahead and get into the worker proposal conversations for this week. What we do for these Hangouts is we go by the highest upvoted. I ask everybody to consider, if you are doing a worker proposal, to join these Hangouts and to post to these RSVP threads, as people who post to them and join the Hangouts earn rewards. Not only do you earn rewards by posting worker proposal in a reply to our Hangouts and the RSVP thread, but you also earn a percentage, your cut, based on how many worker proposals there are of the funds that we have earned. So if I have earned on this particular post $250, I will be giving out 250 Beyond Bits and splitting them among all the people who join up. Each Beyond Bit is worth approximately 90 cents. So with that said, you can make a decent bit of money, quite possibly enough just to pay to put up your worker proposal, which often is a barrier. So with that said, I will go ahead and I'll get started, and I'll run off this list real quick so we can get started with the worker proposal conversations. First today is going to be Talkinator. He's talking about fast Bitcoin on BitShares. I love the idea. I think it's cool. It'll be very interesting to hear what the community feels about it. After that will be Bill Butler, and he is going to be talking about a BitShares UI worker proposal that he has placed on our blockchain and in our forums. And I would urge you guys to all check that out as well. So with that said, Talkinator, would you like to join up and talk a little bit about what you would like to talk about with regard to the fast Bitcoin?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So as everybody, or as probably I imagine many people will know, during this past week, there was a fork in Bitcoin. And related to that, since a fork did occur, there has been discussions about also an alternate fork, an additional fork called, which I like to call fast Bitcoin. This would be a user-issued asset that would be available on the BitShares network and would have all of the benefits of any particular asset that is available on the network, with fast transactions, high throughput, and so on. And this topic has been really pushed and described well by Stan Larimer, who is also around. I don't know if he's interested in talking about it. He has posted several topics describing the benefits of it and how it compares with some of the existing and the new fork. And we can either delve into that, or perhaps we can just jump straight into what might be the possible benefits and cons of actually having that user issue asset on the network. I don't know how people might want to proceed.
Well, let's see, is Stan able to talk about it? I know I have plenty to say about it, but I'll step back and let the guy who talked about it first talk about it.
Well, I'm here, but I'm also kind of under the weather, so I'll just listen in. I think you guys are doing great.
Sounds good, sounds good. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to say about it before I get started on my spiels?
I have a question.
Of course.
So Bitcoin has a mechanism that creates new Bitcoins into existence, and they do that to reward miners. And at some point, at 21 million in some years in the future, it's going to get all mined and be in existence. So if you create a fast Bitcoin with the current Bitcoins and stuff like that, how do you propose to create new ones, and who they are going to be issued to?
So I think I can summarize, I believe, three dominant ideas that I've seen regarding those coins which have not yet been mined. One idea is to actually not, when this asset is initiated on the network, that actually the coins which have not yet been mined, they would actually just never be created as a part of the user registry asset. So that's idea one, just the currently existing coins. Idea two that has been proposed is that the unmined coins would come into existence, but they would be distributed in some way to the existing accounts / keys that currently exist. That was a second idea. And then a third idea that I've seen is where these unmined coins could be distributed and doled out at approximately the same rate that the new coins would be mined into existence. And then there's the question about how they would be distributed, how might they go. One idea that was suggested was possibly that they would be allocated to witnesses, but that's just one idea. So those are currently three ideas that I've seen out there.
I may want to add another idea. And that idea is based on the question of how do you actually distribute the existing Bitcoin to the people that hold their Bitcoin keys. And this is in particular very difficult because in Bitcoin, there's something that's called pay to script hash. That means there's not really, well, there may not necessarily be a public key associated with some Bitcoin that people can claim. So this is a technical problem that Bitcoin doesn't really fit into the account-based model that we have in BitShares. Or you don't want to make a new account for every unspent output in Bitcoin. That's just not scalable. But, and here comes the idea. BitShares knows something that's called vesting balances. Vesting balances are used, A, for cashback from transaction fees, and B, for worker proposals. Let me think, not that I'm missing something. Okay, these vesting balances can have, they basically have a type associated with it. One type would be, well, cliff release or linear release and these kind of things. So there's basically a type associated with every vesting balance. So what about we were to add a vesting balance type that allows us to include not only the Bitcoin, but also the script that is used in unspent outputs directly into these vesting balances. So what you do in vesting balances, usually these vesting balances are associated with an account. I'm not sure whether that's technically possible to not associate it with an account directly, but allow a transaction to claim stuff from a vesting balance by providing some other means of proof. For instance, the same kind of proof that you would deliver in Bitcoin to claiming these. So ultimately, to implement what I'm talking about, we would need to kind of integrate Bitcoin's scripting language into BitShares and do these scripting stuff that Bitcoin can do as vesting balances. And if this is possible, then you could even benefit from the pseudo-anonymity that Bitcoin offers. Namely, you can store stuff in accounts, in addresses and not in accounts. But that's something that needs a lot of coding work. It's just a brain thought, basically.
And what would you say, how for the end user, what would this look like for them?
It could look like, literally, it could look like Bitcoin.
So
At least I don't see a reason why it couldn't.
So are you talking like a front-end interface that looks like Bitcoin kind of thing?
Yeah, the front end is totally independent from what the backend can do. I would say that's totally possible, even though that's a lot of coding work. In the backend first, so that you integrate the Bitcoin scripting language, and then of course on the API front, because you need to kind of offer the features to see what these addresses contain, and then of course the front end itself.
Now, I like the idea, and I think that I think it's necessary if we were to go this path, that you have that user interface that is Bitcoin that's kind of like Bitcoin themed. So Bitcoiners don't psychologically like attack it because it's not what they're used to. Anything that makes the user experience similar to Bitcoin, but still better is obviously what we would aim for. But the thing that I think that is cool about it, and maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong from a technical perspective, but I would imagine that if we put up the work for something like that up front, that it could probably be replicated across a lot of different chains that Bitcoin's coders used by, but it might also be able to be retooled slightly for other chains.
Yeah, the point is that in this case, we are not technically share dropping anything on Bitcoin, but we are rather sucking it into us.
Yeah. Now, with that said, if you were doing that, would we be able to make it so, like, let's say Bob sends 1 Bitcoin to me, 1 Bitcoin United rather, he gets an extra like 0.1 to kind of like, or whatever there is for the extra, like, because there's supposed to be 21 million Bitcoins ever, right? But that we don't have all of them in existence currently, like what was said earlier. So maybe make it so you actually earn extra Bitcoin United for sending transactions, something like that. So you actually are earning, or you at least have I don't want to call it the illusion, but the experience of seeing extra tokens coming in because of using it, paying the fees.
I like what Jared talks about, because I think that one of the values why Bitcoin is valuable is because there's a lot of infrastructure around Bitcoin. There's lots of services that use Bitcoin backend, and if we implement something that allows us to harness that kind of infrastructure, this project has some sort of value, but that would require some effort.
There's another aspect to the Bitcoin United thing that was discussed briefly in the Telegram channel that I'm not sure we have figured out a way to address yet, and that is any user-issued asset. If we're trying to attract Bitcoin users to our ecosystem, then if they have these Bitcoin United UIAs, they can't really do anything with them because there's no BTS in order to use them to exchange, and you have to have a BTS balance in order to do a transfer. So how are we going to address that as another issue?
That's the same thing as with bit assets like BitUSD. There's this pool, the fee pool, and it needs to be funded by the committee. And the cool thing now is, there's an exchange rate, an explicit exchange rate on how many BTS you can obtain from the fee pool by paying BTC. So the transaction fee is tied to BTS, and what I want to go to is you can actually earn the network can earn money by selling BTS slightly above the price for those that want to transfer the Bitcoin to someone else, while still the Bitcoin transfer itself could be cheaper for the Bitcoin holders. Does it make sense for you?
Yes,
cheaper than what?
So the Bitcoin holders need to pay a transaction fee. The Bitcoin holders that have these Bitcoins on BitShares, what they call BTCX or whatever, they need to pay a fee as well. It's the network fee on well, it depends now. Well, at least you could make it such that there's a fee pool for this asset as well, and if people want to pay the fee, they can use this fee pool, and the fee pool would be managed by the issuer, possibly the committee account, and BitShares could actually also make a profit out of refilling this fee pool. This is the same as with BitUSD, where if you're paying the fee in BitUSD, then you're paying 5% more fee than if you were paying the fee in BTS.
But still a lot lower than Bitcoin's So
Yeah.
from a user acquisition perspective, if I'm having to make the decision, do I want to send Bitcoin United at a substantially reduced rate or Bitcoin? It's a no-brainer.
Without sidetracking this conversation, I do want to say that a number of the bugs that are reported on the UI are related to not enough BTS balance in order to perform transactions for especially new users and cryptic error messages surrounding that. So that's going to be something that I'll be pushing or asking for solutions to, as we move forward with the UI.
Yeah, that would be great because lots of people have issues with that.
We almost need some sort of a way to just make it happen, right, for those cases without allowing people to abuse the system.
Yeah.
Some automatic method to replenish the fee pool. Is that what we're talking about, Bill?
Something to make the transaction. I'm saying this very non-technical level, right? Something to make transactions go through when they otherwise wouldn't for new users. I'll state that very generically.
Which I think would relate to the fee pool. But thanks.
Yeah, Bill, these are some good topics to actually, like, if we want to think about it and burrow into it, maybe talk about it in Telegram too. And then as you guys come up with some ideas and thoughts on it, continue updating us on any evolution of the thoughts that come into our view.
One thing that's curious to me is, since October of 2015 when BitShares 2 was launched, I haven't really. I'm sure it's been discussed in some degree, but I really haven't heard any discussions about fee pool being down. But more recently, Open Ledger, for example, has not replenished the fee pool, and there were some discussions by Ronnie about how it's maintained. He has one of his employees maintain it, but I think that's where some of these users' complaints has come in, is they don't have any way to transfer their UIAs of one type or another because they don't have a BTS balance. But you mentioned, Xerox, that BitUSD has a fee pool associated with it, but people don't have an issue. I mean, there hasn't been an issue with the BitUSD fee pool being depleted to where they couldn't transfer things. So I'm wondering what the management mechanisms are for handling these fee pools, and whether or not there's some automation that might take place there or not.
So this is a business decision to do fee pool or not, and it's the responsibility of that business to take care of that. It is easily automatable. I told this to Ronnie a couple times. But it's his decision to do or not to do.
And the automation that you mentioned, I imagine, is not at the blockchain level, but as a separate service.
Yes, because
Okay.
they need to spend the funds from somewhere and need to send them to somewhere.
Right.
And basically, it's a business decision simply because this is a subsidy to help users that if they had a user that has a user issued asset has the wherewithal to fund their account with BTS in some fashion in order to get the transfer done. So in some respects, it's a trade-off between whether the business owner that provides a UAA wants to make that easier for the user, or whether he's going to make the user go through the necessary funding to get things done. And when we're talking about mainstream users or people that are not familiar with our ecosystem, it would behoove user-issued asset owners to fund that fee pool to make it easier, at least for a period of time, so that new users that came and wanted to transfer those UIAs have a way to do it until maybe the ecosystem gets ramped up to the point where they don't need those fee pools because they'll have BTS balances by then.
Yeah, it was not my intention to derail the conversation to this. I'm sorry.
Well, it's related. I think it's very important.
Yeah,
I mean, especially for potentially new users who are not going to be wanting to think too much of any extra steps.
Right, and they don't care whether it's a UIA from somebody else or what they care whether it's BitUSD. All they know is it doesn't work, right?
Exactly.
So you guys feel like there's anything else that we should cover on this topic? I personally I think that having something where there's a way of making it so we can show users how fast it is the same kind of experience, except for instead of like, for instance, if I could look at the Bitcoin wallet today that is based on BitShares, make one that's like that, and it really is pretty much exactly the same. Only when I go to send to an address, it says, "Don't worry." It says something like "send to name," and then you can scroll over it, and it even has something where it says, You no longer need to worry about sending to this long address and hoping that you correctly typed it in, or that you didn't copy it, miss a portion of it when you copied and pasted it. Have it like a little, when you scroll over, read that and see that. And when you send the transaction, it actually tells you how fast it was. Like, done, and even maybe like have something that's like a little artsy thing that comes up and pops up like bam, under 3 seconds. and it shows you your savings in there too. These are all things that we can guide the user to see it and help to frame that so they see what we want them to see. Right? Because those things, if we direct them to those things throughout that experience, it helps to break down those walls that otherwise might be up there from like the tribalism of, oh, I'm not going to use this Bitcoin wallet because it's a different Bitcoin, right? If you can actually have the same experience and show pretty much all of that up front, and it's still there, they still have the same Bitcoin, maybe even extra, who knows, because there's a bunch of extra Bitcoin that hasn't been mined yet. Those types of things I think are extremely important moving forward. And I would love if we would keep that in our minds as we move forward with this, because I think the Bitcoin United idea is really good. I actually had an idea a long time ago I talked to people about behind the scenes called BitLightning, a new chain, just a basic chain like PTS that would do the same thing, but you would still have competition and people who would FUD it and all that stuff. Bitcoin United, I think, is a great brand.
Before we get too sidetracked on another idea, regarding the user interface and this user should asset problem and fee pools, is there a way? I mean, first of all, I would presume that if an account has a UIA and BTS, that it will automatically use the BTS of the person's account, not the fee pool. That's one assumption. The second thing is if that's the case, then we could actually surface in the UI what the available fee pool is, so that if it was empty, you would know that there's going to be a problem.
Absolutely. I agree that the user needs to know prior to hitting the submit button why it's not going to go through, or the fact that it's not eligible to go through. And then they need to have recourse, right? The user needs to be able to push that. But even more important than that is honestly come up with some way where if we can see that this is a relatively new user with relatively low balances, that we could even do some what's the word I'm looking for? Almost a here you go. We're going to let this go through, but here's the problem,
What if there's a way to buy within the interface to really quickly buy BTS with the BTC United coin?
Or we could even potentially have a pool for new users where we could even say, look, for the first few transactions, this actually gets handled, so that we have a good experience the first time.
Yeah, so like you're thinking, Bill, kind of a faucet for new users for that purpose.
Kind of for the first few transactions, but then also even some way to even notify the fee pool holders that the notifications is something that's kind of sorely missing too, right? Some way to notify those who are responsible for filling up those fee pools that look, that you have users trying to use this and they're running into problems as a result. And I don't know how you handle that, but those are important things.
Oh, that's a really good idea. I'm sure that Ronnie and anybody else that is concerned about that would want to have a feature that where they would be notified when the fee pool needs to be replenished, for sure.
I just want to make sure I wasn't trying to derail the conversation. The whole concept by BitLightning, I was just saying this was kind of like similar ways of thinking, and I'm glad to see that there's a way of bringing Bitcoin United. I think is a better branding to it. It's a better branding of the idea, because what's happening right now is the leaders of Bitcoin are kind of divided and really like fighting amongst themselves in a lot of respects, right? The whole concept of Bitcoin United I really think that that's a heck of a lot better than BitLightning. is I guess where I was going with that, Thomas. Sorry about that.
No, no problem, man.
So real quick, is there anything that anybody would like to talk about on this topic beyond what we've already talked about today? If not, I'll go ahead and move on, but I'll give you guys the opportunity to speak or forever hold your tongue on this one until next week anyway. Okay, well, the next one up is Bill Butler, and he is talking about his worker proposal for the BitShares GUI. I could go deeper into it, but I think Bill's probably the best person to talk about what he's planning on doing and his thoughts on it. So I'll go ahead and I'll step back and I'll ask you, Bill, if you can step up and give everybody kind of an overview. Maybe tell them a little bit about yourself in case they don't know how they can contact you, all that stuff, and give them kind of a summary of what you guys are planning on doing and who might be involved and maybe the cost.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. So my name is Bill Butler. It's actually my same username. I've been involved with BitShares since the ProtoShares days. I mined a bunch of ProtoShares and kind of have followed everything Dan has done, as most of you have as well. So I've only recently kind of gotten back into the community. I probably was pretty deep into it about a year and a half ago. Got really busy with real life and have kind of come back around now. I've worked with SVK pretty closely, a little over a year ago when he actually wasn't getting paid. And I had like a 6-month worker proposal. And what I was doing was just managing sort of the sprints, such as they were, and milestones on GitHub for the user interface, the graphene user interface back when it was that. So as part of that, I would help SVK prioritize. I'd try to take the things that we felt were most pressing and put them into milestones, set end dates for those milestones, establish sort of a release schedule, and then communicate, these are the things that were needed to be done. These are the things that got completed. And so we'd put out, each week for probably solid 5 or 6 months, we put out, a nice list of things that were accomplished. And it was fairly successful, although, SVK was the only one that was really consistently sort of working as a team with me. I'd say the rest of the people working on it were probably more core backend type people. And also during that weird time when I think Bitcoin had dropped in value, and I think a lot of the money that they had raised, everyone was kind of scrambling. Steemit was probably being built in the background. So I would say that it was probably a little disheartening, just not being able to move forward in a methodical manner. And so the way I've approached it this time is that I sort of understand the fact that SVK has been the one who has been dedicated more than anybody to the UI effort. He did have a worker proposal at one time. I don't believe that's active anymore. And so he sort of recognizing that he's the gatekeeper to this, and honestly, he's probably a little burned out. I haven't heard that from his mouth, but it wouldn't surprise me one bit. So my thought was that it was important for us to introduce not just one developer, but any number of developers who can apprentice essentially under SVK. And when I say apprentice, I don't mean that these developers know less than SVK. They just know less about this particular application than SVK. And the idea is to begin to groom people who know the inner workings and understand how the UI works relative to the API, understand how the React framework is set up currently. Because there's a lot of things that can be done right now that will greatly reduce the load. And from what I understand from Fabian, once again, this is kind of hearsay because SVK isn't super chatty, at least not with me. And so my understanding is that he wants to be a bit more of a developer and a little bit less of necessarily a gatekeeper. So the idea is that the BitShares Foundation will sort of be code review and gatekeeping, and SBK may do some of that still, but honestly, I think SBK would like to just do some development work too. So the way we've laid out the worker proposal is kind of an equal split of fees to me as the project manager. Calvin Froge, who's a person I've known for years, has 3,000 hours plus of React experience, builds high-end applications, is really good at refactoring, easy to work with, has just got a nice demeanor. And I think he and SBK will get along well. And I know that Xerox and he will get along as well too. So the idea is to create, milestones that everyone sees publicly on GitHub, and people can observe. Okay, look, these are the 12 issues we're working on this week. The way we've kind of worked this out is I know people always complain about price and how much things cost, but it actually costs to have qualified people who are reliable and do what they say they're going to do. So yeah, you could look at this worker proposal and say, it's expensive, but it's not when you consider the benefits. The small tweaks to solving unexpected behaviors and unprofessional ways that people either navigate to things, or the error messages they get, or just the creating an intuitive interface so that the manual isn't as necessary. I mean, you always need to have a manual. There's people that learn in different ways, but I think the goal is to create a product that when you step into it, there's an obvious path. When you get in the airport and you start to go to your gate, you're presented with decisions, right? Left or right to get to your gate. And then as you get close to your gate, it becomes more obvious. And I think our software needs to sort of have that same type of flow. Governance needs to be clear. When I say governance, I'm talking about all the voting aspects. That those need to be in a place where it sort of, they begin and they understand that they're a voting member. When worker proposals come up, or when witnesses are out there, you need to be able to see all the eligible witnesses. You need to be able to maybe have a badge that says, hey, there's 2 more worker proposals. Do you want to vote on them? You haven't voted on them yet. All these types of things that are really important. If you look at my worker proposal, which someone pasted in here earlier, and it's also, of course, available through the wallet, the most important thing is prioritization, and I will argue with anyone that bugs are the most important thing, and sort of a bug marked as high priority is the most critical thing we need to deal with. We can always add features, but kind of hardening the application is important. After bugs, I kind of see low-hanging fruit as important. These are things that are really easy wins. It might be a slash somewhere or whatever. It's something that takes 5 minutes, but it makes a big difference. It doesn't require a whole lot of research. The next thing that's important to me personally, and I think probably for the community, is just application consistency. How do you get to these functions and do these functions flow inside one another? Are they nested well? If there's 3 ways to do something, maybe you should have pointers from the 2 ways to the 1 way to do it, right? Rather than actually creating 3 ways to do something. And then documentation, of course, is important. We need to have, I know we have documentation. For BitShares, we have technical documentation, but I feel like we need a more consolidated approach to user documentation. And I think that needs to be maintained, It can be group maintained, but I think it needs to be a small group of people who all sort of say, look, this is how we go about doing this. And yeah, there's Steemit articles everywhere, right? I mean, I could create a manual that has hyperlinks to every Steemit article out there, but I think there's a benefit to having a local searchable archive that is sort of new user based and kind of a 101 type thing that we can work on along with this. So, our development costs essentially just involve 3 people. It's myself, Calvin, and Sigve, and then there's a a small amount of money also that would be going to the BitShares Foundation for code review, et cetera, as well. My experience is, I'll go over mine. You guys can read about Sigve and Calvin, obviously, but I've been around BitShares about as long as it's been around, invested in, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Steem, PPY, and I've helped manage GitHub issues. My development experience, I actually started an internet service provider in my former life. I started it in 93 and sold it in 99 and then did another one. After that for 7 years, ran that just a really small company with my wife. Then I got into programming after Comcast was coming in and swooping through, and I sold that second one in time. And so I switched to software, and now I'm a VP of engineering for a healthcare company. Startup has been around for about 3 years, and we're selling that software to insurance companies and that sort of thing. So, I know I don't have a lot to point to from a UI UX role, and so I'm just good enough with UI UX to sort of get by. I don't anticipate that I'm going to be the guy that creates these amazing things that everyone says, wow, that's so beautiful. But I do have a knack, I believe, for creating things that are functional and that are intuitive. And I also I have an opinion, but I'm also I think I'm capable of carrying on a dialogue with people in GitHub, and as long as I have other people who have an opinion and care and are willing to have constructive dialogue, I see no reason why we can't arrive at something that most of the community is happy with. You're never going to please everybody.
I have a question for you, Bill, regarding how will you, when it comes to user interface issues, a lot of times it's very subjective, and although you may think it's very intuitive, it may be very unintuitive to another person. What about focus groups or solicitation of ABC? Here's 3 approaches we have to this issue. How do we decide which one is the best one to go for?
If someone else is willing to create a comprehensive approach that we can all talk about, then I'm more than open to that. But so often those who have opinions aren't willing to take the time to lay out the full argument for their opinion, and so it becomes kind of futile. So what I'll typically do is I'll lay out something that I think is pretty close, and then I'll just start asking for comments, and I'll ask for people to defend their position, and I expect to have to defend my position as well.
Well, that seems like a reasonable approach to get things going. I guess the only time that any contrary alternative to that would be is if you yourself or your team has competing approaches that you're not sure what the best way to go is, and it's how do you make the decision, because that's a matter of how you solicit the user base to say which one of these approaches. We've talked about the merits of each of them amongst ourselves, and we think this is probably the best one, but but you need to make sure that it's good with the whole community, because that's why we get into a lot of these issues. The whole user interface as it exists right now is built under somebody's idea of it being intuitive, but clearly that's not very good for the general populace of users that are trying to use it.
I agree with you, and I fully subscribe to dialogue, right? The only way you get this done is by listening to what someone has to say, responding to it in a civil, respectful manner, and get to the root of what it is about that particular feature, right? And at some point, once you're at the core of what the problem is with that feature, there might be 2 or 3 solutions for it, but all you can do at that point is propose, and someone else can propose, and you can debate and then get to the answer. And the beautiful thing about GitHub issues, and that's where I plan to do everything, is that it's all right there. And even the commits related to the discussion are all right there too.
Perfect.
So Bill, is that where you recommend, if this worker goes through and is voted in, is GitHub where you recommend for people to post in concrete issues and or ideas?
Yeah, I just pasted in milestone 1 for due September 1st, 2017. That is my this is where once something makes it to a milestone, it's all sort of assumed. Okay, we already know we want to fix this. We know we want to fix bugs, right? So, but when we get into features, the idea is that these features will be sitting in sort of a proposed feature state with a tag of proposed feature, and at that point, that's where we're talking, and that's where we're figuring it out. And once we have figured it out, we move it to feature, and we put it in a milestone, and we stick hours on it, right? We say it's going to take this much time, and so yes, the short answer, Talkinator, is yes. I want to use GitHub for this.
Sounds good.
I would like to ask a quick question, if you don't mind. Here, let's go ahead. My quick question here is, like you said, a lot of people might think this is too much for a worker proposal. I suspect that's probably not the case, because SDK is involved in some way, shape, or form. But for those who might consider it to be a little bit too expensive, is there a way that you could potentially like cut it into 3 worker proposals?
I could. I'm not sure the benefit there. I mean, if anything, I would go the other way. I would say, look, we should just, if this works well over the course of the next 2 or 3 months, and we like where we're going, but we say, hey, it would be really nice to have a dedicated UX UI person on the team. Let's bump it by another 45, and let's put a UX UI person on it, because everything that we do, we have the assumption here that it is going to contribute to new users coming in, right? If we make it easier for someone to start an account, if we make it easier for them to make their first trade, if we make it easy without errors, right, and without ambiguity, if we do that, then what we do is we capture users. The users don't go back away. The user comes in, sets up an account, for some reason can't change their password, gets in, makes a trade, for some reason can't make their trade. When these things happen, you get the user who they leave, and they say, well, you know what, I'll check this out in 3 months. That's what I do with software that doesn't work right. I say, I'll come back when it's ready.
And you're probably on the fringe, Bill.
Oh, what do you mean?
You're probably one of the few people who would come back after.
Oh, right, exactly. Yeah, you're underscoring my point, right?
Which is the reason I bring it up is really because throughout our history in BitShares, right, we've had some issues with people who do work and get paid for it, but they've kind of like taken the money and just left. And I'm not saying that that's happened quite as much lately, because we've had some amazing all-stars along the lines who haven't given up, right? And they've just, like Xerox and SDK are great examples, right? So obviously there's that, but at the same time, we've had a history where people who aren't really well known, as far as they haven't been around developing and doing a bunch of stuff, there might be some users who are against that, or who would prefer that you quote unquote prove yourself to them and the community before they really like.
Hey guys, good evening.
Hello, Emerge.
Well,
we're in the middle of a hangout, buddy. So Bill, sorry, Bill.
Well, keep in mind that this money isn't getting paid to me. I mean, at least not the worker proposal. It's getting paid to the BitShares Foundation, and the BitShares Foundation is serving as an escrow agent. So, honestly, you could just tell Xerox, hey, look, these guys aren't doing their job. Stop paying them. And that would happen. so there's really very little risk with this, guys. If we do a poor job, then we don't want to be subjected to the wrath of the community any more than you want us sitting around doing nothing.
So this is a good thing to talk about, because with Xerox and this new escrow service, it changes the dynamics substantially, right?
I think so. I think so. Yeah, I mean, we get paid in BitUSD, so we're not subject to the fluctuations of BTS. The foundation will get more BTS than it actually needs in case the price swings one way or the other, and then they'll push the BTS back in once the worker proposal is complete.
There's another aspect to it that's often forgotten, and that is that the BitShares Foundation needs to obtain BitUSD from the markets or borrow it from the market. So either you get an increased supply or you at least get some volume on the internal exchange.
So it helps BitUSD. More liquidity.
Which is actually what we've been considering for quite some time, right? Paying out in BitUSD and the Bit assets.
Right, so this is a manual approach to it.
Now, Xerox, maybe you can talk about this a little bit, because one of the things that I'm thinking about that comes to my mind when we're thinking about this worker proposal, paying out with Bit assets and such, when we have with like the BSIPs for like BSIP 0018, the global resettlement, and bringing back a Bit asset. How important do you think that it is that is done before you start really being able to really push this?
I would. So what we don't have is a clear roadmap on how to coordinate hard forks. Initially, we had hard forks only proposed and coordinated by Cryptonomics, and that's no longer the way that we are doing it, because Cryptonomics no longer develops actively on Graphene or BitShares. So we first need to develop a roadmap for hard forks, and I'm preparing for the case that this roadmap requires your hard forks to be run on the testnet. And that's also the reason why I have had this bounty to upgrade the testnet to the most recent code base, because that will make it easier for new code to be tested on the test network. And once it's tested on the test network and found solid, stable, and whatnot, then it can be proposed to the shareholders for integration in the main network.
I like that idea.
Me too.
Yeah,
I think it's great.
Does anybody have any questions for Bill Butler that I haven't brought up?
One thing would be, what about, since the idea of the testnet just popped in, what about your ideas about launching this for use on the testnet so that they can vet some of these concepts out in your UI?
Anybody can pull, and anything that we've done on any branches. So we could technically make a branch that's called beta or something like that, right? And submit what we've worked on to beta or staging maybe, and then, or even a testnet branch. People could pull the testnet branch, fire up the test, try it out. We could even have testers, dedicated testers for that sort of thing eventually as well.
Yeah, staging I think is a good approach, because it doesn't have to necessarily be an earlier version for for only testing, but staging says it's not in production yet, so anybody that wants to use it in the testnet could just take that branch and apply it to the testnet.
Absolutely, that's how we do it in the real world.
Absolutely. That's how it's done in the real world. That's probably how it should be done here. There's generally the live environment and the test environment, right?
Just to answer your question, Fox, Xerox was alluding to the roadmap, but he didn't actually describe the details of the roadmap. He says that's what's necessary. No, that's what's necessary. So you didn't really miss too much there, I don't think.
Okay, so real quick, does anybody have anything else that they'd like to talk about with Bill? Or Bill, do you have anything that you feel we need to cover that we haven't? Because we're running into about 55 minutes.
No, I'll just close it out by saying, for anyone who's listening to this recording later, it's worker ID 1.14.58, and it's for $150,000 essentially over the course of 6 months for 3 developers. And our goal is to improve the user interface. Please vote for it.
That's right. People can go vote for it within their wallet under Advanced and Voting. And you can see the proposal. And the proposal would begin on August 14th, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
That's right. So it's important to vote before then so it doesn't expire.
What's the threshold for approval of that? How do we determine whether or not how do worker proposals meet a certain threshold of approval?
I could actually try this, Xerox.
Give it a shot.
My understanding, which is probably incorrect, is that if you look at the refund proposal, it has a net votes of 483,000, and I think if we exceed that threshold, then we are in.
Yeah.
Wow, I did it.
It's actually described there's 3 white papers now. One is for the bit assets, another one is for the general concepts behind BitShares, and the third one is from the stress test. And that kind of how this payment stuff works is illustrated there as well. So people that are a little fuzzy about it might want to read that.
I agree. However, I want to point out that having votes doesn't mean that you get to choose the whichever way this blockchain movement should go, because this is still the how you would say the freedom of how people should use the blockchain, because whichever way people should choose, there shouldn't be a uniform way where people should use the blockchain. There should be ways wherein people should be able to use the blockchain.
Correct. That's also what I'd like to make sure people understand, that, for instance, the BitShares Foundation is by far not the only entity that can run worker proposals as for an escrow thing. For instance, Alfredo is running the same way, just has its own set of escrow partners. And no one actually prevents you just to create your own worker. So really no one prevents anyone from doing anything on BitShares as long as you play by the rules of the protocol.
I agree.
If there were other user interface work proposals out there, then there would be some competition to choose from. But at this point, I don't see that. But if anybody wants to propose something, it's available for them to do so.
I'll say something really quickly here. Actually, never mind.
Well, thanks for your time to present. I appreciate it.
Well, Bill, I would love if you would join us and give us some updates on what you're doing every week, or just anytime that you see something that is valuable that you think that you need to let people know about, or something that's important that you need to notify us of. This is a great place for us to all group up every week and get that update into as many heads as possible without them missing it.
Yeah, if we get the proposal and we begin work on this, I would love to give you a 5-minute update every week.
Oh, definitely. Do I sound better, by the way?
Much.
Man.
Much better.
Oh. Okay. Well, it sounds like we are about, or it looks like we're at about 58 minutes. Anything that we need to cover, feel free to go ahead and cover. But before we do so, Bill, how do people reach out to you if they would like to talk to you about stuff, if they'd like to help you with your work?
Is this whale talks, or is this just a Beyond Bitcoin Hangout?
This is the BitShares Hangout currently.
Oh, okay. So I just want to confirm when the Whale Tank Hangout is going to be.
It's going to be after this.
Oh, all right. Sorry.
No, you're fine, man.
Telegram.
Back to you.
Telegram. Bill Butler is the best way to reach me to discuss, and I'm also in the BitShares workers, BitShares decks, and any number of other hangouts there. So on Telegram.
Good. And I will remind everybody to please consider joining up to the t.me Telegram. It would be t.me/BTS workers. This is going to be where I'm going to be directing people who would like to do worker proposals for the BitShares ecosystem. So if you are wanting to, or you're interested in it, or you would like to support worker proposals, I would ask that you consider joining t.me/BTS workers. That's all one word. Now, with that said, thank you everybody for joining up. Thank you very much for all the people who join up as guest speakers who are planning on working in this ecosystem. It is many times a thankless job, and it's many times not quite what you could get paid elsewhere, but we're starting to change that. So I look forward to seeing the developments that come from this and what it may spur in the future from others. So thank you for joining up, and we will see you guys next week at the next